Shalom everybody. Today we're going over Game Design 101 stuff, and I have with me a Mr. David Winnie. I don't think you guys will be able to hear him, but I can always relay questions that he asks along the way. So the purpose of this video is to explain to people how games are made, and we're going to do a little bit of a recap from last time. And I guess it would help if I shared my screen with David so he can see what's going on. There you go, sir. So, can you see it okay?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so basically what we started out with was, this idea, 5-sentence synopsis, six-paragraph treatment, and we're starting to make a game design document. So what are we contributing to the game design document? Well, we have a master asset control list that we need. Eventually, our asset library is going to be pulled into the document, and we are going to add visual effects, we'll add storyboard stuff, we'll add 3D art, 2D art, and then the user interface. Now, after we were done with our video last time, I cleaned it up quite a bit, made it look a bit more professional. And so this is that same exact diagram, just revisited. And then we went and talked about the 2D department and then 2D and 3D. So I cleaned that up quite a bit too. And so we have, our 3 types of artists within the 2D department. We have our 6 classifications of art within the 2D department. And this is how 2D art is processed by artists. And so the idea is that you have a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every 1 character artist that you have in 2D, you have 1 character artist in 3D. So that's what these arrows are demonstrating here. You also have different types of 3D artists, which are important to note because we do not want one 3D artist to do it all. They all have special skill sets and different skill sets, and so we're making a distinction between the different skill sets here. So types of 3D artists, or types of 2D artists, sorry, 3 types of 2D artists. Actually, let's go ahead and modify that a little bit. 3 types of 2D artists. Let's go ahead and do it like that. All right, so we have a concept artist, a blueprinter, and a polisher. And we have concept artists that are in 3D. It's not something I really was able to talk about last time, but nowadays people are trying to conceptualize artwork inside of ZBrush and inside of Mudbox, and the tools are getting better. So 3D conceptual artists are definitely a thing. I don't think a lot of companies are in that place to say that they can successfully do that. Typically in the video game industry, I would say maybe the top 1 to 3% of artists are actually capable of conceptualizing in 3D. And it's not just about the art, the sake of the art, but it's the technical side of the art as well, that you can do all the retopology and basically go directly out of ZBrush into a video game engine. There's just not very many people that can do that. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying that good luck on trying to find those individuals. It's still a birthed process. So over here we have the defining moment of how 3D art is typically done in mid-range studios. And then over here we have the 3D process in general for animation. So, we have the 12 principles of animation, which we really didn't discuss last time. And each one of these is a thing, and I'm going to end up doing a video at some point to kind of demonstrate what each of these 12 principles are. And then I have my own principles of animation that I don't believe are labeled within here. Like weight-based friction and impact friction is typically a Capcom or any other type of fighting game mechanic. It's an extra thing. It's weight plus something else. So we need to make sure that we're identifying those 2 pieces of the puzzle. So what are we doing today? What we're doing today is we're going to move into user interface and visual effects. So I think we're going to do it as 2 separate videos. I actually had to pull my curriculum up so I can make sure I have the right notes, because visual effects is pretty intense. It is a career choice. It is a path. It is not something that you have happenstance and you just kind of stumble upon it. It's a choice. It's a decision. So let's go ahead and take a look at the curriculum. And we can go through these one at a time. So what is visual effects? I think that's the first thing that we have to ask. A visual effect is an abstract representation of a moment that happens in time, signified. It's almost as if it's sound visualized. So, you know, if you have a person being punched in the face or slapped in the face, you want to be able to show an impact that accompanies the sound. So it's not restricted to fighting. It's not restricted to combat. It could be jumping up in the air, and when you hit the ground, dust falls out of the feet and disperses. It could be a helicopter getting close to the ground and wind and dust getting sucked into the blade and being dispersed out through the blade. It could be something as a hurricane. It could be rain. It could be snow. So it's not. There's really no limitation. It has to deal with the elements, and that's why I have it kind of laid out in this manner. And so this curriculum is designed to explain what visual effects are. And even though I have them listed this way, I guess we'll just go over them one by one. So the first type of a visual effect is a linear effect. And so let me demonstrate through YouTube over here what I believe a linear effect is when it comes to video games or movies, okay? So let's pull up. We're going to pull up a Ryu Hadouken. And so we'll pull in something like there we go. So this game is Street Fighter 2. I'm keeping the volume kind of low. And usually when you first start, they start spamming fireballs. And that is a Hadouken. So that's actually a mod because you cannot throw Hadoukens that fast, but that's really funny. But the idea is you have a visual effect leaving one point and going to another point. Another really good example would be a bullet. Even though a bullet does leave and it goes from point A to point B, in real life you have something called a tracer round, so you can actually see which direction the bullets are really headed into because your eye can't pick up the speed of a bullet. So a visual effect must be demonstrated in that way. It's a straight line. So that's one type of effect. Another type of effect is an arc. So let's look at StarCraft, and we'll look at the EMP tank, I think it is. Siege tanks. So siege tanks do two things when they're deployed. They have a arc, but they also have splash damage, which is a radial effect, which I want to be able to demonstrate both. Let's see. Let's try. Let's just try something like this. I was really just hoping that there would be really one thing to be dealing with here. And this is just somebody's animation. Pretty good though. Hopefully I just skip through this video.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can.
Sorry guys.
This sentence is grammatically correct.
Really hard to get to the point nowadays with all this stuff from YouTube. I was not trying to pull up a whole fight. Why can't we just find a siege tank system here? You know, you think that you're going to find something super, super easy. This is probably going to be overkill. I just want one example. Oh, what a mess. Probably would have been faster for me to actually just pull it up. Okay, there we go. At least you can see. Do we just get one tank? Can we just get one? Hey, there we go. Perfect. All right, so this is a siege tank in a game called StarCraft. And the way that this character is designed is it does roll out as a tank, as a tread-based vehicle. Come on. Okay, it does roll out as a tread-based vehicle, and it has a distance function on it. So there's a radius that is assigned to this system that when an enemy crosses a threshold, this will start firing on it. There's a deployment mode, which turns it into a type of turret. And the range in which this mode can detect is almost twice the distance. So what happened is this vehicle shot an arc over on top. It's not a straight shot. It's an arc shot. And what happens is when this vehicle shoots, there's a splash damage that occurs on the impact. So as he starts explaining what happens when you put two siege tanks on the ground, deploy them in siege mode, sorry, I was trying to hit pause. What happens is the health from this guy, well, let's try to add two more guys here. I'm trying to show that when one tank hits and it hits the ground, it will splash and damage other things. And we're just only going to give us one. Come on now. There we go. So when one tank fires and it hits the ground, all of these other areas are affected. So there is maximum damage in the middle of the blast, and this radial damage happens around it. So that's part of our explanation in our curriculum. So you have a linear impact or linear effect, which is going from point A to point B. You have a line which is an arc, and so that means it will shoot over something else, all right, and it will drop down. Another good example of this is anything related to Unreal and first-person shooters like Horizon Zero Dawn. When you're throwing bombs, you can throw as an arc, and even inside of the bowcaster, inside of Gears of War, when you're pulling the trigger back, it actually will, as you squeeze the trigger, the arc will start to form and straighten out. Okay, so radial effects is a radial damage. It does a radial splash damage. And then we're moving into atmospherics. So let me show you guys what atmospherics are. So we can do environment art. So environment, concept, art. So this is a good example here. The closer you are to a camera, the less atmospheric interruption that you have. So as you're looking directly into this area, as you move backwards, all of a sudden there's some dust clouds that form, and there's the dust and the particles in the air start to build, and it pushes objects away. So that's why these clouds are starting to interfere with the buildings back here. It's because the way that distance is designed, you're only going to see clearly what's in front of you in a cloudy or dusty area. So that's one example. Here's another really good example. Atmospherics has to have to deal with all of these particles of dust and ash that are settling. It's creating a dramatic effect that there's more particle buildup in the back of the piece than there is in the front of the piece. And this looks like this is happening underwater, because these are eels. So another really good example, except for it's really blurry. Let me see if I can pull it out into the image, a new tab. Maybe it'll clear up over here. Nope, super tiny. Even though it's a 5,000 pixel image. All right, so let's try to find something else. My Google keyword search was environment concept art. Here's another good piece. Again, you know, as you're putting distance in something, you're going to start to cloud it out. And just, it's not a blur. It's just, you have just all these particles getting in the way of your scene. So here's another good example, just particle building up. So atmospherics have to do with the atmosphere. What is actually happening. So there's really good mountains. This is a loose concept. So this is an abstract, very abstract concept. You understand that this is a tree, but there's no details to really tell you it's a tree. It's just the silhouette's right and the lighting's right. You can tell that this is a mountain, but it's not really a mountain. See, these are just placeholders for those things. And so you understand that these are clouds, but it could be a waterfall. But again, there's just representations. I think this is loading. This is another nice atmospheric concept piece. All this atmosphere is being pushed in the back, and so the atmospheric color that's happening here is being pressed into the trees. This is a really nice example of really healthy atmospheric happening. So another example of example of a different type is what we call God rays. Okay, God rays. Let me see if I can find it. Ah, here we go. This is an actual photograph, but as you can see, the light of the sun that's penetrating through the clouds is leaving these streaks, and where the particles of the clouds and whatever's going on in the atmosphere is picking up the sunlight, the photonic strike. So this is what's known as God rays. I don't know if that's a real photo. So here's another really good example of God rays. So it's supposed to represent glory, and so that's why they call them God rays. What else can be in atmospherics? You know, thunder and lightning. Thunder, of course, is a sound, but it's represented by lightning. Let's see if there's anything else. Really nice concept pieces, just looking at it for the sake of art for the moment. All right, so what else we got here in the list? We've got, okay, the Chinese 5-element system and their 3 states. So for me, when you're trying to communicate visual effects to a group of people, you have to have a starting point, right? So like all words are made up. And so you have different categories of words. And when you're trying to describe an element to something, it's actually harder than you think it is. You understand that fire burns. You understand that water's wet. You understand that wind blows. You understand that earth is solid. But when you're trying to create that type of element inside of a 3D program, you actually need a plugin to do it. Like to do it from scratch is extremely difficult. So some plugins that I suggest taking a look at would be Nuke. Or it's not a plugin, that's an actual full-blown system. So Nuke, Fire, but I'm not talking about like a nuclear bomb. I'm talking about the Nuke, the 3D program, and Compositor. So Nuke has a very robust fire system, and it will help you understand the movement of particles, because fire can be a substance without wind. I know it kind of sounds like it's counterintuitive, but all it is it's consuming another particle. And so when wind is introduced, it will move. And that's one of the reasons why you have, some fire that, just in this situation here, we can understand that it's moving in this way because an introduction of wind was pressed against it. So another element of fire would be smoke. And so if you're creating a type of parameter, you need a system that will help you simulate what smoke is. It's very hard to conceptualize what this does because smoke and fire, the result of smoke and fire is dependent on the substance that's burning. It depends on the chemical composition of what's being consumed. So, and how do you know what fire looks right? It has everything to do with what chemicals being introduced as well. There's a difference between a gas fire from gasoline and a gas fire from propane. It's two different types of simulation. And so in this kind of program, you can actually simulate different particle types. And plus, again, we know when fire is actually making contact with a surface, is it fabric, is it wood, is it formica, how does it all react to fire differently? Well, that's what these simulators are for. Okay, so for those of you who's using 3D Studio Max, you can look at Phoenix, I believe it is. Let's see, 3ds Max, Phoenix. So Phoenix is another type of simulation so this is like a flamethrower type that's being projected out, and then it's obviously hitting something and smoke is being conjured in and being brought in. Now this is a completely different type of fire. So as you can see, there's a state of fire which it is actually making contact with the surface. There is a state of the fire which is being pushed by the wind. There is a state of the fire which is also smoldering because this is further away, so therefore there's a different type of smoke that's accruing here. And then you have a heavier smoke as it's dissipating into the atmosphere, this billowing type of smoke. So each one of these fire types is a different type of particle system in the flow of what's being executed. And it is all left up to the artist as to where and when this effect starts to occur. So Phoenix is definitely something that I recommend for 3D Studio Max users. Phoenix actually has a water type of simulation as well. But if we're gonna move away from the fire conversation and move into water, then I cannot fail to talk about real flow. All right, so let's look at you know what? Let's go ahead and before I do real flow, let's just go ahead and look at Phoenix in YouTube. So this way I can show you, instead of static pictures, I can actually show you the power of what this thing does. Phoenix demo. There we go. It takes quite a bit of processing power in order to demonstrate smoke and fire and different types of physics. So I believe this is showing off their liquid system. Yep. So a lot of the liquid system as well is dependent on which material you use and when. So obviously they're using a liquid material, and then when it strikes up against the rocks, a foam occurs. And even though these are distinct particles, they still need a somewhat of a material to demonstrate this. Really beautiful simulation. Lots of particles. You need lots of processing power for this. Did a good job with the sand absorption in that one. There you go. So there's some nice fire happening. So that's Phoenix. Let's move into real flow. Real flow is pretty amazing. You'll probably notice a lot of commercials from real flow here.
I hate it. I hate it so bad.
So as you can see, real flow is fluid simulation and viscous fluid simulation. So you can definitely change the viscosity of all of these at real time. Alright, I think you guys get the picture. Let's try to move forward a little bit. This is one of those things I can watch this like all day long because it's, or, you know, actually do this all day long. So, there you are with that. So that's real flow. Okay, so what else we got? So wind is not something that you can see at all unless there's a particle introduced. So we're going to skip over that. We can run vortex simulations and hurricane simulations. We already went over fire. Earth simulations. Earth is a combination of things in visual effects. We'll come back to that in a minute. And then metal, of course, is more like a rendering issue rather than a simulation issue. So when you're dealing with metallic materials, it's just a switch that's being demonstrated. And let's see if I can pull up Unreal Metals. So different metal materials have different responses to light. Why are we discussing the 5 Chinese elements? So elements in China are described as earth, wind, water, fire, and metal. And typically what I've seen this is my understanding is that each of these has 3 states. So earth goes from dust to solid earth to mud. You have wind, which goes from vacuum to vortex to push. You have water, which goes from gas, water to ice. You have fire, which goes from smoke, the physical smoldering of the tinder itself, and then the fire, the robust fire. So you have metals, you have lightning, you have solid metal, and you have current. Then this does not include, of course, the crossovers mostly. Like, so you have ice, which is a mixture of, the absence of sun and the introduction of water, so you get a solid state of ice, right? So and then you have snow, which is introducing an atmospheric property. So there is a crossing over of these elements. Like, of course, mud is a liquid substance plus earth, right? And so lava is a different type of substance because that's earth plus fire. So because you're introducing a temperature that's involved with these things, and temperature does affect every single one of these things. So what I've noticed is that the Avatar, The Last Airbender, they do a very fantastic job of trying to get us to understand the basic elements. So you have earth, you have fire, you have water, you have air, and then metal is not on the list, which I always found very interesting that they took it off. But basically, if you go from earth to water, you get plant, and if you go from earth to fire, you get lava. You have fire to air, you get combustion, and you go air to water, you get snow. So, like, this is the really, really nice understanding of what these elements are, and then dead in the middle is spirit. So this is a secular organization that really understands the principles of what this is. But it just was always fascinating to me how metal was left out of the 5 element system because they put it in sync with earth. So you have earth, metal, sand, dust, and push. So these are the different layers of the system. So plant is petroleum, plastic, rubber, and string. Water is ice, blood, vapor, and pressure. Snow is acid, poison, corrosion, and friction. Air is sound, vacuum, deflect, and gravity. You have combustion, which is gas, oxygen, dioxide, and fracture. You have fire, which is blast, lightning, laser, and absorption. And I don't know if I necessarily agree that lightning is a part of fire. That's a very interesting concept. So lava, you have crystal, you have glass, you have fiber, and then tension. And then round and round we go. So this is actually part of my curriculum. I do really enjoy another artist's rendition of how they perceive the 5 elements. And having a chart like this gives a artist a nice reference point to what they're trying to achieve when demonstrating elements. And for the most part, that's visual effects in a box. I don't know if I need to go on above and beyond that. Kind of gave an example of what different people are doing. I have used visual effects programs in the past. I do understand 3D Max's visual effects systems, and I understand After Effects visual effects systems, but I think eventually I'd like myself to get into more visual effects based stuff because I find it fascinating, but that's what I hire other professionals for, so that they can teach our students in a lot greater capacity than I can. So I appreciate your time. So let's go ahead and just write this out, because I think it would be a good idea to have this. So what is visual effects again? So VFX. So VFX is, like I said before, so we have linear types. We have 2, which is lines versus arcs. And this is just a quick recap. Number 3 is you have radial impact, or radial VFX. Number 4, we have atmospherics. And then number 5, we have the 5-element system. Now, I actually failed to talk about something else, which is important, and I don't know why it wasn't in my notes. So 5-element system is earth, wind, water, fire, metal. Whoops. All right, and then also, which is very important, you have sun and moon. Okay, because this is where we get gravity from. And then you also have, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then lastly, in their system, you do have good and evil. Now, I don't appreciate when people stop at good and evil, because God created both. So that means there is a third standard called righteousness. Righteousness is a third standard. So if you're gonna create a Dungeons and Dragons model, okay, you're gonna put evil over here. Well, good would be in the middle, and righteous would be on the right. So typically in a Dungeons and Dragons model, you would have evil, and you had good. So this is not the model that we use. We use this, and then what happens in the middle over here, on this line, you have lawful, and you have chaos, or chaotic. So when you're doing character generation, right? If you put a dot over here, so if this is a scale of 1 to 10 and this is a scale of 1 to 10, let's say you put your mark over here and this is a 5 and this is a 5, that means your character's lawfully good individual, so clearly he's on the other side of good, but he's not quite righteous. And so if you put your dot over here on this side, that means, let's just say this is also number 5, so this over here, he's a 4, he's still closer to being good, but he's on his way to being evil, but he's not lawful at all, he's chaotic good. So this is a standard that we use over here for our character generators, and it's just interesting that when you're trying to portray a visual effect of what good and evil is, you have a capacity to use a difference between black and dark. Black and dark. So usually moon is considered black. Oh, my bad. I have a difference. It's backwards. You have a moon, which is considered dark, and you have evil, which is considered black. And so sun is usually portrayed as light, and it's usually almost always affiliated with goodness. But that's not true at all in any capacity. It has nothing to do with anything. There's a lot of people that worship the sun and has nothing to do with goodness. So how then do you differentiate these over here? So you could essentially say, let's use the word temperature. Okay, so if we're going to look at this on a temperature scale, and I'll just move these dashes over here and erase this a little bit. Maybe this will help a little bit. So if we're talking about in terms of color temperature, because I have a color temperature chart over here, let's just say that sun is represented by a warm light, and goodness is demonstrated by a cool light. So when you're talking about in terms of white, there's a value scale here. And I'm just trying to give artists some kind of launching point, a point of reference to try something new, okay? Let's do color temperature. All right, and so this way you guys can see a little bit more accurately what I'm talking about. So here we go. Let's go. Oh, that'll work too. So color temperature, it's color temperature is based on lumens, how many candles are lit, right? So in terms of daylight, you're having clearly over 7,000 candles lit, over 7,000. So that's how we get a bluer sky. And as the sun sets, the color temperature in the sky decreases and the candles become less. So that's kind of what I'm trying to give people an understanding of in terms of goodness. Now on righteousness, on this scale, if we're looking in terms of what type of photonic light we can use, I'm going to use a brighter white. Maybe not something like that, but how about maybe just something like this? Just to give people an understanding of the subtle differences between goodness and righteousness. How about we do that? Let's try this. There we go. So maybe that's righteousness is displayed in this type of white, almost white. So if we're looking at a chart, you can see that 255 is max. That's max is white. You could use white as well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just trying to throw some creativity in your general direction. That's all we're trying to do here. Okay, so maybe righteousness is this color white. And I'll draw a little arrow so people can see it for one day. And then, of course, goodness, and then sun. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it for the visual effects. David, you got anything that you want to add or subtract or curiosities so I can announce it to everybody?
Nope, just following along with what you're teaching, and this is all new. It's all excellent new concepts for me to get a hold of. I appreciate it.
Cool. All right, so I guess we'll be back in a little bit with a user interface and user experience demo. So thanks for watching. We'll be back in a little bit.